Well, welcome to Living a Good Life. My name is Brad Fain, and today I am super excited. I have Amy St. Peter joining me today, and she is the Deputy Executive Director of Maricopa Association of Governments, MAG, and managing a campaign that I'm super excited about because I think you're trying to accomplish the same thing we are. We just have different roles in how we get there, and it's all about housing and getting housing to those people who have, the way I look at it is they've just been priced out of the market by no fault of their own. They have good jobs. They might be dual income families, and they're working, doing what they're supposed to be doing, trying to raise their family, and the market's just taken off, and now they can't afford a home. And so as a community builder, we've been trying to find solutions of how do we get a community approved in our community where we can build more attainable housing that reaches that workforce, the restaurant manager, the nurse, the teacher, the firefighter, the person running your local grocery store that are just getting squeezed out because we see that as the health of our market. And if we don't have a healthy market and great people living in it, then our community will start to diminish. And when I learned about your program, I was so excited that you were willing to come on, Amy, and we're just excited to hear about what you're doing and what you're up to. So why don't you give us just a quick, brief background of what you're up to and what is your campaign?
Excellent. Brad, thank you so much. Really appreciate this opportunity to be able to have this dialogue with you. It's critical that more people join this dialogue. And so we really appreciate this platform and being able to have this discussion and really consider what can we each do as individuals, what can we do as communities, what can we do as professionals to ensure that people have access to a home that meets their needs. And a home that meets their needs can be defined in different ways. It could be meets their needs physically. Are they physically able to live safely in that home? Financially, can they afford to remain in that home over the long term? And also in terms of the geography, is that home close to the people and places that they love? Is it close to work? Is it close to medical care? Can they access all of the ingredients that they need to live a full and purposeful life? And so we've been working on this for a number of years now. And a lot of this work started when we became increasingly concerned about the increases in homelessness. And so back in 2020, MAG took more of a central role in strengthening that regional response to homelessness, because homelessness and housing are absolutely connected. When people are homeless, it's because they don't have access to housing for a variety of different reasons. So we can't really talk about solving homelessness if we're not talking about making housing more broadly available. And so back in 2020, we started working with our local and tribal governments, our member agencies, our community partners to strengthen that regional response to homelessness, keeping in mind that housing is a really critical ingredient to that. And so we developed Pathways Home. That's a regional homelessness action plan for local and tribal governments. We did so in close partnership with our Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care, philanthropy, business interests, different kinds of stakeholders, absolutely the nonprofit community, really rallying around what can we do differently together and better together than what we can do on our own. And so we developed three main action steps in that plan. One is to work together regionally better. How can we share information together better? How can we share resources? How can we bring more resources to the table? Keeping in mind that with both really housing and homelessness, it's not up to any one sector. Both of these issues really inherently need a wide variety of different stakeholders. And so how can we bring those stakeholders together better? The second action step, and this is really where our conversation comes in today, is how do we increase access to housing? Increasing access to temporary housing to help people really intervene in the moment of their crisis. But then how do we help them to attain permanent housing? And what does that permanent housing look like? It looks different for different people, but how can we really, in essence, provide a more diverse array of options, of housing options within every single community? Because every community benefits when we have that diversity of choice. And so it's really about helping to catalyze people's individual lifestyle choices in that safe community setting in a sustainable way that can be maintained for the long term. So that was our second area of focus. And then our third area of focus with Pathways Home is to take a look at what are the different sectors involved in this space. Because housing is not just the house in a vacuum, it's housing in the midst of a community. Who else, what else needs to be accessible in that community to the person who's living in that house? So who are the other sectors that need to be involved? So there's some really fantastic work that's underway right now, working with the education community, for example, the healthcare community, the business community, transportation, all these different areas really come into play with housing, because housing is ultimately about where people live. And people live their full lives, and those full lives intersect with each of these different sectors. So how can we work with these different sectors better? And so we started off on the implementation of Pathways Home, and that included the development of a public education campaign, which is where we meet today. And so with that public education campaign, of course, it's not just MAG engaged in this space. It's a whole host of really talented partners. One of those talented partners is Home Matters Arizona, and they're also working on a public education campaign. So we didn't want to confuse the marketplace. We didn't want to waste resources. So we fully merged our two efforts. So merging the efforts between Home Matters Arizona, Maricopa Association of Governments, all with the goal of developing a public education campaign. Because as we were developing Pathways Home, our homelessness action plan, we realized that all of the best ideas, research models don't really do us any good if we can't implement them in communities. And so we need to be partnering really closely with communities, with our neighbors, to be able to implement these ideas more successfully and more fully. And housing is essential to that conversation. So we see in here that there are, of course, a variety of different opinions about housing, about what kind of housing do we want in our communities, what kind of housing do we need in our communities, what's the best way to construct that housing, what's the best way to retain the availability of that housing. And so all of those different points of view really beget having a constructive conversation about it. And it's harder to have a constructive conversation about it if we're speaking in different terms, if we don't understand each other's perspectives, and if we're not aware of the issue in the first place. So we very much wanted to develop a robust public education campaign that would increase acceptance of having that variety of housing options in each community. So can we build housing that is more accessible, more affordable to folks, and really doing so in a responsible, thoughtful way? Because there are, again, a variety of different perspectives, and if they're polarized and if we're not listening to each other, then we're just not going to get anywhere positive in that conversation. We're not going to be able to do the things that are really needed in that conversation. So first and foremost is raising awareness about what does it mean to have a home that you can afford for the long term. Because so often when we talk about affordable housing, and it's natural, right? A lot of people, our friends and neighbors, ourselves maybe, immediately have this very specific picture of this is the type of housing, and it's not about just housing and homes. It's this housing model, in a physical infrastructure kind of way. Or it's about a very specific kind of person. And so, this is the person who needs that kind of housing. And as soon as we draw that us and them line in the sand, we're at odds and we're not necessarily relating to one another. And so if we can have a more positive conversation, really develop more positive language around this, then that's the goal. Because we're not here to dictate what that housing looks like. We're not trying to tell anybody what kind of housing, very specifically needs to be in their community. We're saying, let's have a constructive conversation about it. And so we've spent the last year or more developing that language.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, because when we're out there doing what we do and trying to get zoning cases approved so we can build houses, and one of the design elements that we try to incorporate is a community where you can live your entire life. So that can be where you get your starter home, or you get into a home where you can maybe start building equity so that you can get to your starter home. And because some people right now, they just can't even get the down payment to get into their very first home. And we run into the same thing, what you just touched on there. And I think I put it under fear. People have fear when you talk about attainability and you talk about we need homes for people who just can't quite get that down payment. And they think of they think of the worst image of a person they can think of that might be in that situation, or they think of the worst looking home they've ever seen, and that's what you're going to build, and I don't want that near me. How are you guys addressing that fear factor that people have about this housing and who needs it? Because I think they're always shocked when we say, we're talking to employers and a nurse can't afford a home. And they're like, well, I don't have a problem with a nurse living next to me. I didn't think you meant a nurse. Well, so how do we bridge that knowledge gap, which I think is creating the fear, what you were leading to, that polarizes us?
Absolutely. And I think it's two main strategies or two main factors. One is to drive with the data, because hopefully we might have different opinions, but hopefully we can at least acknowledge the facts. And here are the facts. When we look at the supply of housing, both in home ownership in rental housing over the past just over 10 years. So going back to 2011, at least when we're looking at Maricopa County, but I think this is reflected statewide and also nationally. When we look at home sales, for example, under $300,000, we've lost 75% of the housing stock there. 75% is gone. We can't find it anymore under $300,000. And that's for home ownership. At the same time, now when we're looking at rental units, it's even more dire. We've lost 86% of rents under $1,000. 86%. Now, I know when I just graduated from college and I was trying to pay off my truck, I was trying to pay off my student loans, I was living on food boxes, and my rent wasn't anywhere near $1,000. It was less than $500, actually. Mm-hmm. And so that was for me, right? And so I can relate to the idea of, I can't afford a rent that's $1,000. And when you talk about people just starting out, we are removing rungs from that ladder of home ownership. So being able to have a rent under $1,000, so you can save up for that down payment, you know. And people have very different opinions about mobile home parks, but mobile homes are generally a very affordable option for folks. You can buy a decent affordable home for maybe $60,000. That rung on the ladder is being removed. Being able to afford that starter home, that's another rung on the ladder. That's being removed. So when we look at stable communities, a lot of it is around home ownership. It's also around being able to pay no more than 30% of your income every single month on housing. Because if something happens like that high medical bill, a high car repair bill, an unexpected loss of income for whatever reason you're sick, you are more likely to lose your home if you're paying more than 30%. So when we look at, again, in Maricopa County, we have 500,000 people who are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And we have thousands and thousands of people who are paying more than 50% of their income every single month just on housing. So when we can talk about the data, we might have different thoughts about the data. We might have different ideas of what to do with the data, but we need to be talking about the data to help define that conversation. The other element that's really critical too is to tell and to share authentic stories. So to say, this is my neighbor, she's a nurse, she's barely able to afford her housing right now. I'm worried that with this next rent increase, she won't be able to maintain her housing anymore. It's telling the stories about, this is the retired couple. They're living on a fixed income. Their health insurance just went up by more than 12%, and they aren't able to maintain their housing anymore. They're living on the edge. Or tragically, one of those spouses passes away, then you have 100% of the bills with 50% of the income, and they can't maintain. When we look at homelessness, for example, we see so many more people coming into the homelessness for the first time, and they're older adults. They're 65 years and older, and it's because they can't afford the rent anymore. So we need to be telling those stories. So what we're trying to do through Home is Where It All Starts, the name of our public education campaign, is to tell those stories. It's to let people know, we're not talking about this amorphous idea that's this abstract concept. We're talking about our neighbors. We're talking about ourselves. We're talking about people who will not have a home anymore because they can't afford it. They've worked hard their entire lives. They're still working, and they simply can't afford to live anywhere near the doctor's office where they work or the hospital where they work. They can't afford to live near the school where they teach at. They can't afford to live close to the family and friends who can provide that support system. So in essence, when we're talking about the availability of housing, we're talking about the social fabric of that community. We're talking about the ability of that community to be able to survive and to thrive in a responsible way.
Well, I think it's disingenuous of a community that expects to have healthcare workers, expects to have police officers and firefighters. When they're in an emergency situation, they expect care immediately. And you hear it on the news that something went wrong and it took them an extra 3 minutes to get care and it turned out tragically. And we hear all those stories and people expect that service, but then they fight so hard, like they want those people to live 45 minutes away from their community or the next community over. And it's just such a disconnect for me that we expect a level of service, but then we don't want to help those folks live close to us and be a part of our community and be the fabric of our community.
Right. And I find too, sometimes it's lack of awareness, that people don't always realize that for every high level position, right, you need 7 support staff often. And so they want the high level person coming in. They want the high wage earner. And they don't realize maybe for every top earning doctor, we have 7 support staff around them who also need to live. And the longer they have to commute, that takes time away from their communities, it takes time away from their families, and people need choices. So again, we're not trying to tell people where you should live and what kind of housing you should have. We simply want to provide an array of choices for people and choices for communities too, so that they can self-actualize into the community that they really want to be, that they can be. They can realize their full potential as communities, as residents, as neighbors to one another, because they have those choices.
Yeah, I think when you were talking about the doctors, I was talking to our local hospital system here, and I didn't realize it, but it makes total sense. I think it's like 92 or 93% of their employees at a hospital are not doctors. So when you think of that system and you only think of the doctor, the ER doc, whatever you're doing, you think of the doctor, and maybe the nurse, and maybe one other person, but it's like 93% of the people that make that experience, whatever it is, aren't doctors, and they're different wage earners, and they all need a place to be close to that system to help provide the care. And it's that team of care that you get no matter where you go. You go to a restaurant, it's not just the owner of the restaurant or the manager, it's the people in the back of the kitchen that you never see that are preparing your food, making sure all that works, the server that's serving it to you. And I mean, we just had a recent experience in our community where a restaurant was closed on a Friday night because they didn't have employees. And it's a challenge. And I don't think people are connecting that dot, that there's not an employee here because they can't live here. They couldn't afford to be in our community, so they're in another community, so they found a job there. And they want to locate where they live and work where they live. And I think that's a challenge that I'm seeing from what we're doing as a community builder, is getting the public aware of that disconnect. It's like you have your life, you're retired, maybe you're doing great. But what about the next generation that's coming up and the generation after that? And how are we giving them a start? We seem to have lost that mentorship where, mom and dad become grandparents and then they retire and they have all this experience for their whole life, and they're sharing it with their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids in a community, and that makes it so healthy. But today we seem to have that disconnect of, why don't you share your wisdom and welcome young people to your community and give them an opportunity to get a start? And I think that's what you're trying to do, is like, we got to get these people here, and how do we do it as a community? And there's that disconnect, and it's really interesting why people don't see it. It makes so much sense when I hear you talk about it. I'm like, that's what we're saying, and we're getting stuff thrown at us. No way, we don't want you. We don't want anything.
Right. Well, and it's hard too, right? Because people have valid concerns and valid ideas all around the table in this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And when we can build up that shared language, when we can have a constructive conversation around this, when we humanize each other, when we it's so easy and so tempting, right, to dehumanize somebody that we don't agree with, and say, well, they don't agree with us for this reason, or and their value for us. I think it's a challenge, but it's really, really important to be able to keep everyone at the table, right? To be able to have that conversation, say, well, I'm sensing this disconnect. Why is that there for you? And to find out, because we need to be addressing people's concerns very realistically, right? And very candidly, very transparently, because we don't always agree. We're not going to all agree, but we do have to live in community with each other. So getting to your point, right, that we can invite people into this conversation and to really welcome them into it with different perspectives and learn from each other and understand that we're not going to agree, but we have to move forward. And we're going to be better off if we're all moving forward together. And so we've been working really hard to try and figure out, what is that shared language then? So instead of saying affordable housing, because we understand that term has negative connotations for some, instead to refer to something that might be more universally accepted, like affordable rents and mortgages, or homes that meet our needs, homes within reach. And to get people to relate to not just housing, because that's a physical structure. It's about home. Where do you feel at home? And can your neighbor live at home safely and with dignity? And also, to your point, that when people aren't able to do that, when they have to drive those long distances, there's a sacrifice, and that price is paid often by their families. So if I have to drive a really long distance to get into work every day, it means that maybe I'm not volunteering with my daughter's Girl Scout troop or my son's soccer team, or I'm not as engaged in my faith community. There are prices to be paid, and it's by others in the community, and we don't always understand that, because it's not in front of us. We go into our garage, we shut the door, we listen to our playlist, not the broad radio necessarily. Our lives are so curated to reinforce what we think we already know. And we need to break out of that. We need to venture out of those safe circles to be able to have conversations with folks that we might not normally agree with. And there's something to be learned there. There's something to be gained. But we need that shared language. So with Home is where it all starts. We have all kinds of resources. We have things that you can post on social media, things that you can post on a website, things that you can share in an email. But it's kind of the playbook for how do we start having those conversations. So if you go to homeiswhereitallstarts.org, you can download our toolkit. We ask you to start using it right away, and also to personalize it, because we've started off with some basic building blocks, but we need to personalize that because we each know our own circles of influence the best, and we can help adapt that message so that it can resonate in all of these different circles of influence. And we can do that in our own circles better than we can do it for each other, and so it's really critical just to be able to have that conversation, because I see in so many other aspects of our community life where there's walls now, or there's different lines that are drawn, and it's not healthy. And it's understandable because, to your point, I think it is about fear. It's about fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, fear of losing what we have. But we're going to meet our destiny on the road that we take to avoid it, right? Like the old saying, that those fears will be actualized if we don't have these conversations. We need to be talking about these ideas because then we can develop better solutions as a result.
Yeah, and I think one thing that Arizona has that makes it challenging is we're a very desirable place to live. And we have a lot of people moving to Arizona from all over, California, the Midwest, the North, the Northeast. We can drive around our community and count the number of different license plates that are driving around, and those are people that want to move here. And we love to welcome them. But the challenge I see in that is, instead of bringing their memories of what they really liked about where they left, they always bring the worst element. And they're like, I don't want that here. And so you talked about the long commutes. And so they're like, I don't want long commutes here. I don't want traffic. So therefore, let's just stop all development and no more houses, no more. We don't want this because I just left that. I left LA maybe. And I was in that commute that was just miserable. And I think that makes it challenging for what you're doing and for what we're doing to constantly get this message out with a constant inflow of new people into the conversation. And they're bringing their background with them of, I just left a place and I don't want that. And they're not as open to the dialogue because they're left something.
Well, and it's interesting too, right? I think there's a strength and a challenge with just about any kind of situation or dynamic. So you're exactly right. We've been one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing county, state, city. Take your geography. We've been at the forefront of population growth for a very long time. And it's not as if people are coming here and thinking, oh, this is too hot, and then they leave. They come here and they think, I love the amenities. I love the quality of life. I love the environment. I love the people. I love the scene. I love the opportunities. And then they stay, which is great. And you're right. It is a challenge sometimes to acclimate all of these different kinds of people with all these different experiences and priorities too. And people move here for a reason. And it's because they like something here better than what they found back at home, whether that's Chicago or California or wherever. So they're making the choice to come here. But then we're always trying to catch up with that growth, so we're always trying to get ahead of that curve, but the fast growth just keeps on coming, the people keep on coming. But then I think the flip side of that, because it is a challenge, and I completely agree with you there. The flip side to that, at least from my experience and what I've seen, is there's not as much of kind of an establishment as what you might find in other communities, and the result of that is good ideas can be implemented a lot more quickly because people are used to kind of new ideas and different things. And we're this great melting pot of all of these diverse backgrounds. And there's not the kind of the old guard holding like, no, it has to be this way. We probably have some of that to varying degrees, but less than what I've seen in other parts of the country. And we also have a more dispersed power structure here, so you have some really big communities and they kind of balance each other out. And so our leaders work together really, really well. And there's a sense of collaboration here. And that's not to say that we don't have our differences. We absolutely do. And there's still the sides and, the different camps. But I think overall, I think when it comes right down to it, we know how to collaborate. And so we need to draw on that. We need to leverage that, I think. And when we do, I think we're more successful as a result.
I would agree with that. I think our brightest days and years up in northern Arizona and Prescott Valley and Prescott is when the different communities work together. When they rallied around a common challenge and they worked together, that's when we were always at our best. And then you see times when they're not working together, and it really doesn't bring out the best of us, and nothing gets solved other than people go into their camps and they dig in, and we don't solve problems together. And then in the meantime, kind of going back to a little bit of the data, all these people are moving here, right? And one of the stats I saw was like the house over the last few years, the cost of housing has gone up like over 50%, and wages haven't kept up with that, obviously. And there's a lot of factors to the housing going up. One, I think, is the influx of people and the inventory coming on. The other is the economy that we've been in with rising costs of materials and labor and all that. It's costing more to build what we used to build. And all these things are coming together to really make it unaffordable. And then, like, I know what we experience a lot in our community up here is cash buyers. Arizona has a great exchange rate. That's the way I look at it. You can cash out your home from another state, and you can buy a bigger home for less money and put money in the bank. And so now all of a sudden you may have had a mortgage wherever you moved from. And in Arizona, you might be a cash buyer. But for those workers that are just starting out, or those people that are struggling to get into a home that need to finance it, that's another challenge they face in getting into a home, because they might make a great offer, and then somebody else comes in and says, I'll pay cash and close in 2 weeks. And it's another element that is really driving this challenge that we're both trying to work against, is those people. We're just a great exchange rate of a state for a lot of states that are moving here. It's just really affordable housing from where they came from. Even though we're saying it's not affordable, got to be careful how we talk here, right? It's not affordable for a lot of people, but it is for people that are moving here.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And then short-term rentals. And people have different opinions on short-term rentals and whether they should be allowed or not, and where, here, not there, whatever. But short-term rentals take housing units off the market for people who are living here, for residents. And so we need to at least factor that into the equation. How many units are now in short-term rentals instead of long-term rentals? And what does that mean in terms of the housing supply that we might need to build up for long-term rentals or for home ownership? So I'm not saying, I'm not making any statements, if it's bad, if it's good, whatever. It's simply part of our reality now. And how are we adapting to that reality? And I'm not sure that we've caught up with that yet. So I think there's some more work there to be done. And that'll take a lot of people working together to figure out what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. So, we saw the housing bubble in the early 2000s, 2007, and that was driven a lot by the investors that were buying, to your point, buying those houses and turning them into rentals. We kind of worked our way out of that. It took us a while. It wasn't quick. And now we're at a new situation where we still have this lack of affordability. I don't think we have the renter scene that we had in the 2007 and 8 era, but we do have a different situation that is kind of producing the same outcome. Housing is not becoming available to those who need it. And one of the things that, as I grew up and you watch the news and everything, the long commutes of other states. You look at San Francisco as just a classic example. People would have to live an hour and a half away, and they would commute into the city to work because there's either no housing or certainly lack of affordability. And I fear that if we don't get into this conversation that you're trying to have, that we will become that in our own way in Arizona, where people can't afford to live near their job and they're commuting an hour and a half. And you touched on it earlier, what that does to the quality of life of that person's family. And then I think what people are missing is that community, because you're taking that person out of the community. If all they do is get up at 4 a.m., drive an hour and a half to work somewhere else for 8 hours, drive an hour and a half back, they go to bed, do it again, they're not a part of the fabric of the community anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it's tough too, because I think sometimes when we're comfortable, right? Like for you and I, we might be fine. We might be able to afford our housing and we're looking at property values going up significantly. We're thinking, hey, that's great news. I've got a ton of equity that I didn't have before. So all of that's good and I'm comfortable and I'm okay. What's important, though, is to look beyond our own front yards to realize, but not everybody in my community is okay. And not everybody can afford to live in my community. Parents just retired, and can they live in my community? Maybe, maybe not, depending. And those are tough questions. I mean, it's tough to explain to your kids, no, grandma, grandpa can't live in our community. Why? Because they can't afford to live here. It's a tough conversation. And that's a sacrifice that's paid by that family, And it's easy to think about it in terms of exclusively being somebody else's choice, exclusively being somebody else's responsibility. But what I think is really important to realize is this affects all of us. Even if we're fine and our community isn't, eventually we're not going to be fine either, right? Yeah. Because having access to an adequate supply of housing that provides an affordable rent or mortgage, that means that your economic development can flourish. And if you don't have that, then it can stress. Because if people can't afford to live there, or if they're struggling to live there, then they aren't going to be there anymore. And businesses won't be able to locate their workers. We have businesses right now who are building their own housing because their employees can't find housing. Mm-hmm. And as they're trying to get people to come here, they're not able always to tell them, yes, we can guarantee that you can find housing, when they know that's not necessarily the case. So they're building their own housing. So we're seeing all these different solutions and dynamics that maybe we haven't had before, because as Arizona, statewide, our calling card has been affordability. Affordability, great quality of life, great amenities, right? Mm-hmm. We've lost the affordability card now.
We have.
So what are we going to do to get that back? Or what other amenity are we going to provide that will offset that loss? I'm not sure that we've answered that question yet.
Would you say that it's part of the responsibility of the community, all the citizens that make up that community, to continue to provide housing for their community because the growth is coming? It's like people are moving here. We can't stop them. They're in another state. There's somebody right now living in another state that's making a decision to move to Arizona. Whether it's your community or our community, they're coming. And there's nothing we can do to stop them and say no. And so would you say there's a responsibility of the community to make sure there's housing available for those people coming? Or would you say it's not our responsibility and they just got here too late? So sorry.
Right. I think we all have a responsibility to, one, have this conversation, and two, to have this conversation in a responsible, thoughtful manner. To be open to being surprised, to learning something new, to be open to sharing something that you've learned, that you've considered, some thought that you've formulated, and share that with somebody who maybe is hearing that for the first time. We each have a responsibility. Even down to when we talk, how we talk about housing and access to it, being responsible in the way that we convey our thoughts and feelings about it, and not polarizing the other side, not dehumanizing the other side, seeking to understand the other side, I think is really critically important. And then to act as engaged, informed citizens. I'm not going to tell people how to vote. I would encourage everybody to vote and to be thoughtful when they do it. And when they go to their town council meeting, city council meeting, to be thoughtful in the feedback that they're giving and to really seek to understand something that seems very different at first to you. We all have responsibility to do that. And it's hard to do that, I think, when people are comfortable. And it's also hard to do that when we think our voice doesn't matter. And our voices do matter. And they matter critically right now in having this incredibly important conversation.
I would agree. And I want to add another element to that, because I think it's what gives people a stronger voice, but it also gives them that voice that maybe isn't thoughtful and respectful, as you just mentioned, that you need to be thoughtful and respectful. It's social media. Yes. And how is social media impacting your ability to get your message out in a thoughtful, respectful way, to have an adult conversation and be respectful of each other's opinions? With social media, I find you have these keyboard kings and queens that are out there, and they're so bold in their statements, but they're sitting at home typing their messages, and I really think it distorts our conversation and makes it so much harder. Are you guys able to deal with that and manage that social media influence on a conversation?
Great question. And again, the strength can be the weakness, right? So on the strength side of it, If you go to our toolkit, you'll find lots of social media posts and material that you can post. And social media is such an effective, really affordable way to get the message out. So in some ways, social media has really kind of leveled the playing field. So we can add more voices to that chorus, and we can do so in a really quick and sustainable way. So that's an absolute benefit. But to your point, though, too, particularly when people feel anonymous, they feel kind of shielded. And really, I think we all need to check ourselves. Would I say this if the person were sitting in front of me? And if I wouldn't say it, I shouldn't be posting it. And it comes down to that. And would I be proud of that post being shared with somebody, with this person? And would I feel good about my role in that conversation? And if that's a no, or if there's a hesitation or I think so, then we shouldn't be posting it, I mean, I've got 2 kids at home, and I'm telling them 2 things, right? Well, many things. They probably tell you I tell them too much, but at least 2 things about social media. And one of them is be responsible about it. And then the second is know that whatever you post is going to live there for a very long time. So even something that seems really innocuous and totally benign right now, when you're applying for a job, would you want that seen? Would you want your prospective boss seeing that? And so, on some feeds, I am their friend on it, and others they've kind of cut me off, and that's their privacy, and that's fine. But we can't cut off the world, And when we're active on social media, we need to picture the person in front of us that we're affecting. And if we're not proud of how we're affecting that person, we probably shouldn't be doing it. So I think we need to use social media. I think we need to embrace it. I think we need to leverage that to our benefit and see it as a tool that it is. Like any other tool, it can be used well or it can be used really poorly. You can hammer the nail into the wall and put up the picture, or you can, crush your finger and then you're going to the ER, or you're in pain. I mean, tools are there to be used, and they all need to be used in a really responsible way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think social media has really opened it up to allow more people into the conversation. And I like that part of it. I think it's also just allowed people to be disruptive and not be curious, but be disruptive, because they're coming from a frame of mind. They just don't like what you're doing. And I guess everything you said, they're not curious. They're not willing to be surprised. They're not willing to learn something new. They're just set with what they want. And I think that's our challenge is how we overcome that to get more people curious. And I think that curiosity ultimately leads to care. And you got to have curiosity, you got to have care, because if you don't have care, then you're not really going to be looking around your community to say, how can we make this a better place for everybody? Not just myself. It's not just about me. It's kind of like, what handprint am I going to leave on the community that makes it a better place for the next group, the next generation to be here? And I think that's missing sometimes.
I agree. And I think it comes down to that sense of responsibility, that we each have a responsibility to care for ourselves, to care for our neighbors, to care for our families, and to care for our community. And part of caring for a community is making sure that everyone can live there and that everyone has the ability to find housing that's affordable for their budget, that's appropriate for their physical needs, and that's supportive of the emotional connections that they have with their family, friends, and neighbors.
Mm-hmm. So let's give everybody another little bio on Home is Where It All Starts. I love your headline, because I really think for so many different aspects, not only housing, but everything. Tell us how we can get engaged. I know you've mentioned the website a couple times. What's the best way for an individual citizen to get involved, and what's the best way for a business to get involved?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So homeiswhereitallstarts.org. Please go to the website. You can download the toolkit. You can access the graphics for social media, for websites, for personal emails, for personal conversation too, right? Because we're living this work. It's not just a day job or a side job or whatever, or a contract. We're living the effects of this work. And so we invite everyone, whether you're a private individual, if you're a business owner, if you're a teacher, if you're working in local government, if you're an elected official, a community, whoever you are, this is about you. This is about all of us. So go to homeiswhereitallstarts.org, download the toolkit. There's going to be more and more information on the website. We're filming stories right now, again, getting back to the really sharing authentic stories about people who are touched by this and being able to help people relate to each other as neighbors. Housed or unhoused, or struggling or comfortable, we're all neighbors and we're all in this together. So we encourage everyone to go to the website, check it out. If there's something that would be helpful to you to have that constructive conversation and you're not finding it, please let us know. There's a way that you can email us and we will respond, and we'll be thoroughly excited to have this conversation with you. And if we can be invited into different circles, presentations, different environments, please give us a call. We'd love to have this conversation with anyone who cares to partake.
Great. And I know you're the executive director of Maricopa Association of Governments, but this is something for all communities in Arizona, not just in Maricopa. I want to make sure people don't think, well, that's just Maricopa County and Phoenix and Scottsdale, and they're not about Prescott Valley, and us up here.
Right. No, absolutely. This really is about all communities throughout the state, really throughout the country. But I think we're doing a really good job of addressing this now. There's a lot of work to do, but I think that we can do it if we're all working together, and that is all communities throughout the entire state.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Amy. And it's been so great talking to you. And I think we're fighting the same fight, coming at it from two different angles, which I think we need 10 more angles to come at it, because it is a really big problem. And it's so essential to the vitality of our community and ultimately our state. And so I appreciate the fight you're taking on and trying to educate people, and anything we can do to support, just let us know, because we're trying to do the same, our small part up here in Prescott Valley.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. We're very happy to be able to partner with you on this.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.